This property belongs to the whole family now. My mother's words stabbed into my ears just as I turned off the car engine. I had just finished a long shift at my friend Claire's cafe and finally slid into my driveway. And then, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mother, my sister Kristen, and her 3 kids were camped out on my front porch as if they were about to start a weekend getaway. At their feet was a mountain of luggage I had never seen before. "What are you staring at, Denise? Hurry up and open the door." My mother jerked her chin toward the front door, completely ignoring the fact that I was the owner of the house. Still in a daze, I got out of the car and climbed the porch steps, unlocking the door almost automatically. The moment the lock clicked open, Kristen rushed her kids inside. "Come on, kids. Your new rooms are this way." Their excited cheers shattered the quiet of what was supposed to be my sanctuary. Wait, what is going on here? My voice might as well have been a whisper. No one reacted. My mother placed a firm hand on my shoulder, speaking with the tone of someone announcing an irreversible decree. "I told you, didn't I? This place is family property now. It's far too big for you to live in alone. And since we need it, of course you should share it with us." Her words weren't a suggestion. They were a verdict, final, non-negotiable, absolute. My home had stopped being mine without my consent. My heartbeat pounded with anger and fear as reality sank in. Kristen strutted around the living room like some self-appointed interior designer, pointing toward the big windows. "Look, kids, you can see the yard from here. Let's put a swing out there. Oh, and Denise, those boring houseplants of yours? Just move them out to the backyard or something." She spoke as if I didn't exist. My tastes, my choices, the home I'd built, none of it mattered. To her, it was all clutter. Before I could say anything, my mother seized my arm. Her grip was shockingly strong. "Listen to me, Denise. This is your aunt's wish. She always valued family above everything. If she were alive, she'd be heartbroken to see her own family cramped in a tiny apartment while you keep this big house all to yourself." The word aunt hit me like a blade. My aunt had been kind, someone who cared about my mother even after her divorce. But she would never have approved of anyone trampling someone else's boundaries. My mother was using her kindness as a shield to justify their greed. "That's right," Kristen added, her voice trembling as if she were on the verge of tears. "That apartment has such thin walls that the neighbors complain if the kids run for even a minute. Every night I'm yelling at them to be quiet. I feel like a terrible mom. But here they can finally breathe." She spoke like I was responsible for all of their suffering. In their minds, this invasion was an act of noble sacrifice for the sake of the poor children. Then my mother looked straight into my eyes and delivered her final blow. "You should be grateful, Denise. You finally get to contribute to the family in a meaningful way." She wasn't trying to convince me anymore. This was a declaration of the new order. "Wait." My voice shook, thin and fragile even to my own ears. I couldn't let them steamroll me. I pulled my arm away and stepped in front of Kristen and the kids. I said, "Wait, this is my house. You don't get to decide things without me. And there's no way Aunt Mary would have wanted something like this." My mother and Kristen exchanged a look, then exhaled softly, as if I'd just told a childish joke. That expression froze my blood. "Oh, Denise," my mother sighed, as if scolding a naive child. "You may not understand yet, but this is how the adult world works. Families support each other. You've just been running away from that responsibility." Kristen gave me a pitying look. Through her eyes gleamed with unmistakable contempt. "You're just tired from your cafe shifts, Denise. Don't worry. We'll figure out all the complicated stuff for you. You just need to move into the smallest room, the one with the worst sunlight. You're gone most of the day anyway." Every word sliced into my pride like a knife. To them, I was someone with no money, no judgment, and no authority. Someone who needed guidance. I work at the cafe every day to help a friend and to keep a connection to the world. But to them, that job is all I am. They never even tried to see who I really am. Before I could protest again, they began measuring the walls as if they already owned the place. "This wall is perfect for our TV. And the kids' bunk bed can go in this room." My house was being reshaped right in front of me into theirs. All I could do was clench my jaw in helpless frustration. "This cheap sofa has to go." When Kristen spoke, my mother responded, "The wall color is way too dark. We'll repaint it this weekend." Their conversations were no longer about asking for my permission, just notifying me after the fact. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like I had become invisible. Emotional pleas would never work on people with such thick skin. Then I would speak in the only language they understood, the language of undeniable facts. Without a word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Oh, Denise. Planning to play games at a time like this? Kristen sneered, treating me like a child. My mother added sternly, "You can't run away from reality." I ignored them and tapped an app. What appeared on the screen was the login page to a professional real estate management portal. I entered my user ID and password without hesitation. A moment later, detailed information about this house filled the screen. The purchase date, property tax history, and the most important line of all. I held the screen up right in front of them, interrupting their excited discussion about rearranging my home. Owner, Brown Holdings, LLC. Kristen frowned and leaned in. Brown Holdings? What is that? Some company Aunt Mary made to manage her estate? My mother's eyebrows knit together as she stared at the unfamiliar name. For the first time, I saw a small crack form in their once confident expressions. They were finally beginning to realize that there was information they didn't know, and that it mattered. I met their uneasy gazes and spoke softly, clearly. It's a company, and I am the sole owner. Real silence fell over the loft for the first time. The measuring tape slipped from Kristen's hand. What you're doing right now constitutes attempted unlawful entry, I continued. If you do not leave immediately, I will have you arrested. My words shattered their hopes like ice. My mother broke the silence first, letting out a dry laugh and patting my shoulder. Denise, your jokes are going too far. While you're playing this little company game, we're trying to talk about real-life matters. Now put your phone away. She still wanted to believe this was childish defiance, but her voice was trembling. Kristen said nothing. She just stared at me, then at the screen, then back at me again. Her eyes filled not with contempt this time, but pure confusion, and the faintest hint of fear. This isn't a joke, I said quietly. I founded this real estate investment company when I was 26. This house is the first property I bought through it. I swiped to another page. A list of assets owned by Brown Holdings, LLC filled the screen. A commercial building downtown, luxury apartments in the suburbs, several single-family homes. At the bottom, the estimated values and the total combined assets, a number they would never come close to seeing in their lifetime. The cafe job? Kristen finally whispered. I help Claire only when she's short-staffed. This is my real work. At that moment, I could clearly see the color drain from my mother's face. Her pride was crumbling with an audible, devastating force. The daughter she had pitied, belittled, and assumed she could control had transformed into someone she didn't recognize. Someone far above her. That realization must have been unbearable. And in the next moment, she twisted that humiliation into anger. So what? I don't care how wealthy you are. We're family. And if you have this much money, helping us is your responsibility. It was the last and strongest weapon she had always relied on. In a way, my mother's defiance was predictable. To her, logic and facts didn't matter. What mattered was whether her demands would be met. Nothing more. But I was no longer willing to entertain her emotional arguments. I held my smartphone up to my ear as if making a call. Then, deliberately loud enough for them to hear, I spoke clearly. Hello, yes. I'd like to report trespassers in my home. They claim to be family, but they refuse to leave after being warned. Those words were more effective than any fact could ever be. Kristen grabbed my arm, panicked. Denise, stop, please. But my mother was different. Instead of fear, she let out a sharp, triumphant exhale. And then she slowly reached into her handbag and, as if putting it on display, pulled out a single key. It was a spare key to my house. The moment I saw it, instinct kicked in. I tapped my phone screen and began recording a voice memo. Everything from this point on needed to be documented. Call the police if you want. But before you do, let me remind you of something, Denise. You gave me this key, which means I have your permission to enter this house anytime I want. So this is not trespassing. She dangled the key in front of my face like a gambler revealing her winning card. Kristen, emboldened by the display, chimed in triumphantly. That's right, and I have a key too. I borrowed Mom's and got it duplicated, so there's nothing illegal about any of this. Their words stirred in me not just anger, but a kind of chilling dread. They had twisted my kindness, bent the law to suit themselves, and felt no guilt whatsoever. Their thinking was beyond anything I could comprehend. I understand everything well, I said quietly. I understand exactly what the two of you are thinking. My mother misinterpreted my calm as surrender. She tucked the key back into her bag with a satisfied smile and delivered her final command. Good, then it's settled. Next Monday at 9 a.m., I'll bring the moving truck here. Kristen spoke up timidly. Mom, but the kids have school on Monday. My mother dismissed her concern as if it were the most irrelevant thing in the world. They can take the school bus here after class. Their rooms will be ready by then. Is there a problem? That shut Kristen up immediately. In my mother's mind, everything was already decided. Make sure the rooms are cleared for us by then. And if you dare say anything about the police again, I will disown you. With that parting threat, they swept out of the house like a storm. Silence settled over the living room, but it no longer felt like my sanctuary. It felt like a battlefield, one with a ticking deadline set for Monday at 9 a.m. After the storm passed, the house was eerily quiet, but my mind was filled with the image of my mother twirling that key and her smug words echoing over and over. It's not trespassing. That sentence pierced through every thought I had. Their logic was absurd. A spare key did not give them the legal right to move in against the owner's will. So why was she so confident? I paced the living room, replaying the day's events again and again in my mind. Then I realized something. A single, glaring inconsistency. Why didn't they use the spare key to enter? A memory surfaced, something from a few months ago. Right before I had left for a long business trip, my mother had tearfully begged me, what if something happens to you? What if you collapse alone in this house? I won't be able to sleep at night. Please, Denise, let me keep a spare key, just in case. At the time, I had believed her excessive worry was love, and I couldn't bring myself to refuse. So I handed over the key. Today, she wielded that very key, taken by exploiting my goodwill and guilt, as a weapon of intrusion, shaking it in front of me. And yet she didn't use the key immediately. Instead, she waited until I got home and forced me to unlock the door. It was calculated. A trap. If I obeyed and opened the door myself, then legally, I had invited them inside. Later, if I reported trespassing, she could say, no, she let us in. This is just a family dispute. A perfectly crafted countermeasure? Their plan was far more malicious and strategic than I had imagined. This wasn't selfishness or neediness. This was a premeditated takeover of my property. At that realization, any remaining affection I had for them evaporated completely. The fear inside me hardened into cold steel. If these were the rules of the game she wanted to play, then I would answer with my own rules. And crush her with everything I had. The day after that nightmare of a Monday dawned. Tuesday morning, I had barely slept. There was no time for emotion. I had 6 days before their self-appointed deadline. I pulled my laptop from the kitchen drawer and powered it on. I was no longer Denise the cafe employee. I was Denise Brown, CEO of Brown Holdings, LLC. My first task, fortify this house completely. I searched online for the highest-rated 24-hour locksmith in the city. Among several options, one name stood out. A man known for making locks impossible to break, according to reviews. Mr. Irving. I contacted him immediately. The man on the phone listened to my brief explanation and replied in a calm, steady voice, a common family dispute. Leave it to me. He promised he would arrive in just 2 hours. Next, I opened the website of Guardian Security, the company with whom I held a corporate contract. I contacted the representative using the chat function. This is customer code 774, Denise Brown. I need an emergency top-level security upgrade on one of my properties. The locksmith is working right now and is scheduled to finish at 2:30 p.m. Please dispatch your team immediately after. There was no need to explain the situation. My customer code alone gave them access to all relevant information about my assets. The representative's reply was prompt and precise. Understood, Miss Brown. Thank you for the information. We'll have the technical team arrive at 3 p.m. They should be able to take over seamlessly once Mr. Irving completes his work. Right on time, Mr. Irving arrived. With professional efficiency, he replaced the front door's main lock with a fully keyless, military-grade encrypted digital keypad system. He also replaced the locks on the back door and every window with special mechanisms that were impossible to pick. By the time he finished, the spare key my mother had, and the copy Kristen had likely made, had become nothing more than sentimental trinkets. Mr. Irving handed me the new access code and gave me a quiet smile. With this, no one can enter unless you allow it. My house was quietly transforming into a fortress. At 3 p.m. on Tuesday, just as promised, the Guardian Security technical team arrived. They installed multiple high-performance cameras both inside and outside the house, each capable of automatically tracking movement. All footage would be stored in the cloud, accessible from my smartphone 24/7. Sensors were added to every door and window. If any unauthorized opening was detected, an ear-splitting alarm would sound and the police would be notified instantly. The physical fortification became flawless, but my battle was far from over. In fact, it was only the beginning. On Wednesday morning, I headed to the office of my attorney, Mr. Hansen. He had handled every legal matter for me since I established my company, someone I trusted completely. So, Denise, what kind of trouble are we dealing with this time? Hansen knew I rarely visited in person. I calmly and objectively explained everything that had happened on Monday. The attempted intrusion, the misunderstanding about the inheritance, the revelation of my true identity, my mother's ultimatum, and the taunting display of the spare key. Do you have evidence? At his question, I nodded. I recorded everything from the moment she waved the key at me. Hansen set down his pen, his expression sharpening. A wise decision. This isn't a simple family squabble. It's malicious trespassing and coercion. They exploited your goodwill and guilt to carry out a premeditated attempt to seize your property. His words gave legal shape to the anger and fear I had been carrying. What should I do? First, we'll formally preserve the audio as evidence. Next, we'll gather every official document proving this property is solely owned by your company. And finally, Hansen looked directly into my eyes. On Monday morning, the moment they show up, call the police without hesitation. That will be a lawful act of defending your property. I nodded deeply at his firm words. The law was on my side. Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. I sank into the living room sofa and took a sip of freshly brewed coffee. On the large wall-mounted monitor, the exterior security camera feeds were displayed in 4 panels. Like an audience member waiting for a movie to begin, I sat in silence and waited. Soon, a massive moving truck slowly appeared on the street in front of my home. Its size seemed almost symbolic of the scale of their greed. My mother stepped out of the passenger seat. Kristen climbed out from the driver's side. Both wore expressions of absolute confidence, as if their new life at my house was already certain. 2 movers in work uniforms climbed down from the truck, waiting for my mother's instructions. All right, let's get started. Her triumphant voice reached me clearly through the monitor's audio. Kristen, like a conquering hero, bounded up the porch steps and faced the front door. But in the next instant, she froze. Mom, what is this? At Kristen's stunned voice, my mother stepped onto the porch with a frown. Then she too fell silent. The old brass doorknob and keyhole that had been there just last week were gone, vanished without a trace. In their place was a seamless metal panel with a cool blue-white glow emanating from a digital keypad at its center. It looked like something from a spaceship in a sci-fi movie. What is this supposed to mean? My mother reached out toward the keypad as though she were approaching something unreal. But she didn't touch it. Her pride refused to acknowledge anything she couldn't understand. Even the movers looked confused, watching from a distance, unsure of what was happening. Kristen began pounding frantically on the spot where the doorknob used to be. Denise, open this door. What have you done? Her shrill voice echoed uselessly through the quiet suburban morning. I silently set down my coffee cup and simply watched the absurd scene unfolding on the monitor. The more she banged on the door, the more Kristen's high-pitched yelling turned into hysterical screaming. My mother had completely lost the dignity she'd had at the beginning and could only stare blankly at the digital keypad. I could practically see her mind grinding to a halt, unable to process this unexpected reality. The movers, sensing the abnormal state of their client's family, must have realized that this was not a situation for professionals to get involved in. They exchanged glances, returned to the truck's cab, and watched quietly from a distance. At that moment, a car pulled up in front of my house. The man who stepped out was Peter, the security officer from the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, whom I had contacted on Tuesday. He glanced once at the disturbance in front of my home, then climbed the porch steps with slow, intimidating composure. "Ladies, is there some kind of problem?" Peter's calm voice snapped my mother back to reality, and she made the mistake of assuming he was on her side. "Oh, thank goodness. My daughter has locked us out without cause. We're family. Tell her to open this door immediately." She pointed at the door with her chin as though Peter were her subordinate. But Peter didn't flinch. He simply operated his tablet with practiced precision. "Just to confirm, are you Barbara and Kristen?" "Yes," my mother replied sharply. "What of it?" "We have received an official request from Miss Denise Brown, the legal owner of this property. You two are registered as persons of concern and are prohibited from entering these premises. I must ask you to leave immediately." Peter's words ignited her anger like dry tinder. "What? Don't be ridiculous. The owner is my daughter. You have no authority to— Fine, then I'll speak to someone who does." My mother, her hands trembling, pulled out her phone and dialed emergency services. "Hello, police. My daughter has stolen my home. Yes, that's right. Hurry." And with that, she dug her own grave. Watching through the monitor, I exhaled quietly. This part was no longer my job. It was the law. Soon, a police cruiser arrived silently. Sirens off. The moment the two officers stepped out, my mother rushed toward them as if she'd been waiting her whole life. Then, like a seasoned actress, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing dramatically. "Officer, please listen. My daughter is inside. She's locked me and my poor sister's family out. And when my grandchildren come home from school, they'll have nowhere to go." Beside her, Kristen hugged herself and wailed as though invisible children were clinging to her legs. To anyone unaware of the circumstances, it would have seemed like the perfect tragic scene. On the monitor, I saw the younger officer frown, torn between the crying mother and the imposing, alien-looking digital keypad behind her. At that moment, I pressed the remote and unlocked the digital lock from inside. A soft click echoed, and I slowly opened the door. Then I stepped out onto the porch, facing everyone gathered there. "I am Denise Brown, the legal owner of this property." All eyes snapped to me at once. For a moment, my mother forgot her performance and glared at me with naked hatred. I walked toward the older officer and handed him the documents that my attorney Hansen had prepared, freshly notarized and stamped. "These are the official property records proving ownership, along with the corporate registration for Brown Holdings LLC. As you can see, the property belongs entirely to me." The officer accepted the thick stack and began reviewing it carefully. His brow furrowed. A few minutes of silence passed. When he finally finished, he let out a long breath and turned to my mother. His eyes no longer held even a hint of sympathy. "Ma'am, in the face of these legally certified documents, your claim holds no weight. According to these records, you have no rights whatsoever to this property. Furthermore, attempting to reside here against the owner's will qualifies as attempted aggravated trespass under state law, a serious criminal offense." The word criminal, a concept she had likely never associated with herself, cut through her pride like a blade. Her handbag slipped from her numb fingers, falling to the concrete. Lipstick, a compact mirror, and the spare key she had once flaunted spilled out with a dry clatter. "You are to gather your belongings and remove the truck from the premises immediately. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to place you under arrest. This is your final warning." The officer's tone was cold and absolute. My mother could do nothing but stare blankly at the scattered remains of her authority. The officer's stern voice shattered the frozen air. "Did you not hear me? Leave, now." Only then did reality finally sink in for them. My mother shot me a single, murderous glare, an expression filled with enough hatred to kill, then turned on her heel without a word. Her steps were weak and unsteady, as if the strings of a marionette had suddenly been cut. Kristen hurried to gather the belongings scattered across the ground and ran after her. Realizing that this farce had reached its end, the movers quickly started their truck. The vehicle, packed with the remnants of a new life they would never have and the ridiculous ambitions they held, rolled away as though retreating in defeat. A few days later, I was in the office of my attorney, Mr. Hansen, signing the formal application for a restraining order. The weight of the pen pressing against the paper reflected the weight of my decision. With this, a legal wall is established, but they will resist emotionally. Under no circumstances should you respond, Hansen said. His prediction proved to be shockingly accurate. On the day the order was officially approved, my phone erupted like a storm. Voicemail after voicemail from my mother, her hysterical screaming alternating with pitiful sobs. "You've forgotten everything I did to raise you. You'll die alone and rot in loneliness." Word after word sounded like a curse. From Kristen came long text messages filled with rage and blame. "The cancellation fee for the movers is $4,000. You should be paying that. You've ruined our lives. How dare you be the only one who gets to be happy?" But none of their words stirred even the slightest ripple in me anymore. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I simply took screenshots of every call log and message, then forwarded them to Attorney Hansen's email with the subject line, "Additional evidence." Their emotional attacks no longer reached me. They were nothing more than empty data to be added to a legal file, proof of their violations. When I finished forwarding everything, I erased their contact information from my phone without a moment's hesitation. The chains that had bound me for so many years vanished without a sound. Later, Attorney Hansen told me that the incident that day had spread quickly through the neighborhood and even to our relatives, thanks to the police involvement. My mother and Kristen were shunned for their selfish behavior and became completely isolated. On top of that, burdened by the hefty penalty charged by the moving company, Kristen faced an urgent deadline to vacate her current apartment. She had prematurely sent a move-out notice, believing the relocation would proceed, and she still hadn't found a new place to live. When I returned home, I found a silence as strong and solid as steel, a silence protected by the law and by my own resolve. This had once been my battlefield. Now, it has returned to being my sanctuary. I opened my laptop and began reviewing documents for my next investment project. My life belongs to me, and I will never again allow anyone to interfere with it.